Behemoth is what most people say, but Jace usually puts his own twist.
That is a twist because I'll used to when we played ball years ago, which is why I remember these things, and we would face a human creature of ginormous proportions. I would say, look at this behemoth that we got to face, like on the mound. And people would say, what? And I say, read your Bible.
Well, it's like there were two women. I can't remember the exact context, but you brought this up now from the Old Testament, and their names were Big Thana and Teresh. And so that was their names. And so when we'd see a couple old gals come by, I'd say, yeah, there's old Big Thana and Teresh right there. That's
all in good.
I've always said I've done the same thing. I just call it behemoth. That's a behemoth of a man, or that's this big behemoth.
Yeah, I like behemoth version. But what I was going to say is I do think it does answer some of the questions that people who I think are trying to poke fun at the Bible, and they're like, oh, what about the dinosaurs and all? I mean, there's a couple of references to mystical animals that probably would fall in the lines of the dinosaur world.
Yeah.
And but interesting, and it's okay if you think you see something that's not conducive to our habitat.
But we're also fascinated by it because it's such a family story. It's funny, Jace, because I asked Alex, because she works for us and interacts a lot with our people that listen to podcasts, and I said, do people are they, into this discussion we're having about the Black Panther and all that? She said, no, they don't care. That's just y'all. So I was like,
moving on,
I guess. But
it really is interesting that no one else cares about the Black Panther, but we do keep talking about it.
I know it's a family story.
It's not a family. There's people. Look, every time I'm around people,
but you're right. Remember when you said that about the show? All the people
they all showed up. I was telling you that people they think they see strange creatures, but you got to remember in our culture of a lot of alcohol abuse and drugs, and you throw all that, old age, and just the fear of man, eyesight. We're seeing things all the time. There's a reason they make jokes about people seeing pink elephants outside their window.
Think about was it Nessie, the Loch Ness monster over in that? We were at that pond filming for our show, and there are people that travel there looking for that, mythical sea creature.
I mean, the bottom line is, to tie this with what we were talking about on the last podcast, is that, we have a certain amount of fear in us because we are mortal.
Yeah.
And as people of the wilderness, because that's what we are, I've often had times when I was walking through the woods and I'm by myself and I hear a strange sound and nobody's looking, but I'm looking around thinking, I just feel like there's something in here that could get me. And I'd say at least half a dozen times I just took off running to whatever I drove in. I thought, no, I'm out of here,
Well, and when you grow up in the woods like we did, every sound that we would hear at night, was like, I wonder if that's something that's going to get me,
Yeah, it's like, I remember when we were kids, we watched that movie. I think it was called Salem's Lot.
Yep.
Which
a
lot of people say, well, why did your parents allow you to watch that? No, they were watching it with us. And then I go to bed, and some creature was crawling on the window after I just watched some vampires tapping on the window. And I was terrified,
That picture they had of that vampire in there was, he wasn't like the suave Dracula. Yeah. He was like a monster, and it had an impact on us. You're right, Jess.
I mean, we never watched horror. Like, my parents were more responsible parents, and we didn't do that kind of stuff.
The problem is my parent is sitting here listening to this. You remember that?
No. When we would come to your house, though, like I was exposed to things. I mean, there was Friday the 13th. I mean, Jason, Salem's Lot.
That's the one, yeah.
I mean, I was like, whoa, it was always an experience.
I was a teenager when those slasher movies started, and we lived out in those settings where all those movies were like the setup. You're out in the out in the woods, and all of a sudden.
Well, my parents were more like, let's just watch it together and deal with it right now. And so that's why I told that story. I mean, most
y'all were
of my
watching. I remember watching Death Wish at your house.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm going back. It
Zach,
was like
we went and watched that for Christmas. What Phil was there.
That was our Christmas Eve movie.
And I remember telling my friends that
Dirty
they were
Harry
like, "Well,
and
how
Death
did your
Wish."
parents allow you to do that?" I said, "They took us." It's so funny because all these memories I have, being 10 or 12 years old. Look, my mom, in some scenes, she would cover my eyes, and in others, she would cover my ears. It was ears, eyes, ears, eyes.
It's like let me have the Wonder Woman poster and then painting some longer pants on
Phil
it.
would say, "If you ever talk like that, I'll whoop your tail."
Speaking of feral cats, I mean, like it was like feral kids running around. I mean, it was every man for himself.
Oh, we
But it
were.
was
If you
fun.
want to see a movie about our childhood, watch the movie. What was it called? War.
I told Missy that when I watched that movie, I was a little emotional about it.
Yeah.
And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "It just reminds me of my childhood."
What's the name of the movie?
Kevin Costner
Kevin
movie
Costner's in
called
it.
The War, and those
The War.
kids going around. If
The
you ever
Liam
want to
Nichols.
see what my childhood was like,
That's it.
that movie was an exact representation of what we did.
Yeah, whoever wrote that, I need to look into it because whoever wrote that lived our childhood. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I've never seen it.
Every day you would get up and you would go explore because they just lived in an area where
Right.
that's what they did.
That's right.
And that's what we did. We
It
got
was
up
set in a
we
rural
went-
area in the country.
went out in the woods. We were exploring. I don't remember anything other than that. We were always
we built
on the
stuff. We built forts. We built all these. Every was an adventure, and it was that way when I was even little. When we were up in Arkansas, Dad, in Junction City, my whole childhood was like an adventure.
I went barefooted for about 2 years.
But that was before Jesus, right?
Yeah,
I think I was going to say whiskey was involved.
yeah. I just didn't wear shoes. No, that came on down there when I was fishing out there.
You were barefoot most of my childhood.
Stepping around them fish.
Yeah.
They got thorns, coming off of them, so you don't want to step on one.
Yeah, I never
But I
figured
can't
that
believe
out.
I could remember Mom having a light.
I don't know what that meant at that age.
She had a light and a pair of tweezers and a needle, and she would spend an hour picking things out of your feet.
Yep.
Well, you went barefoot squirrel hunting because it was more quiet. I do
Yeah.
remember that.
Oh yeah.
So
No, we're talking even in the cold. You're out there. You out there duck hunting?
well,
barefoot?
that's what I remember when I was a little bitty kid. The first time he took us duck hunting, that was before he came to Jesus. I mean, it was below freezing.
Yeah.
And Phil was barefoot walking around, and
Just a pair of jeans.
but I didn't understand the
I was
concept of
truly
whiskey.
a man
back
of the
then.
woods.
Yeah.
You were a man of the woods. This is why we all revered you so much. It was like nothing can affect
We went
this man.
duck hunting, one duck season. I remember one season, and I just didn't wear shoes.
Yeah.
It was right before I repented.
Yeah.
But,
That's why I brought up whiskey. is what-
everybody jumped out of the boat, walking out in shallow water, shooting in the woods. But some of them would look and say, "Good night of living." He said, "He ain't got any shoes on."
Well, you didn't have money for waiters back then anyway. That
No.
would probably been super
I think it
expensive.
was more who's a man battle cry.